very good.
Well, again, like previous speakers, I do have disclosures, which I will show on the first slide. But I felt that the title was very, very exciting because basically I can say anything we want. We have no data. And I can hypothesize, and this is my disclosures for the talk. But basically, there are multiple devices that are being developed, and many of them have started already the feasibility trials, and the approach on how to deploy those devices varies very much. Initially, have been via transapical. But they switch also now into some devices being transseptal. And the combination of transseptal and retroaortic is also in the game. But the reality is, how are those devices being anchored into the mitral valve? Well, let's start by saying that the mitral valve, it is not a valve like the aortic valve. The aortic valve is basically a valve. The mitral valve is an apparatus, and that apparatus entails more than just a valve. So when we are anchoring that valve, we really need to take into consideration all the surrounding structures of the ventricle, including the ventricular muscle. So you can see that from this slide that there are multiple ways of anchoring the device. However, there is only one device that I know of that has included the fixation of the left ventricular, which is a tendyne valve, which has fixed the ventricular muscle to the implanted mitral valve. So there are many more in the cooks, and this is not the purpose of this, is how can I predict whether these devices are going to end up with severe paravalvular leaks? We've learned the lesson very well from the TAVR, where we were seeing minimal paravalvular leaks or major paravalvular leaks. We say, oh, it's not a big deal. It was a big deal. It is a big deal. And what should we expect for the transcatheter mitral valve? I think it's very simple. I could say very simply, most likely, all these devices are going to end up with significant paravalvular leak. Well, I think we need to be cautious on making such an early affirmation that yes, is most likely. I think we've learned the lesson, and I think there is a lot of points that need to be into the thought process to consider whether these are going to be indeed a problem for these devices. What would be the problems leading to these paravalvular leaks? First of all, these devices are quite larger than the aortic valves. They are set in an asymmetric multiplanar anatomy. All these are factors that can induce to developing leaks. They have a much higher closing pressure than the aortic valve is. And those leaflets are under a tremendous pressure when the ventricle contracts in systole. And therefore, if it's not well sealed all around, it is easier to conceive that these leaks are going to be significant. It is very complex to anchor that valve in there. How are you going to anchor the valve? The annulus, there is an annulus, but it's not a complete fibrous annulus all the way around. There are other structures, the chordae, the papillary muscles, and so forth, that makes anchoring that valve very, very challenging. And of course, there is the interaction between the aortic valve and LVOT with the inflow mitral valve that we are putting. So all these are going to play a big role in whether there will see more paravalvular leaks or not in these devices. Well, this is the different types of anchoring. The apical tethering of the valve, to me, is a very ingenious and very integrated more into the structure of a mitral apparatus rather than just a valve in itself. But there are also very creative ways of anchoring that valve, as you can see from this slide. Now, what we think is the most important part is really understanding the size of the valve where we are going to implant the neovalve. And for that, I think the understanding of the anatomy is absolutely crucial. We believe, and now it's obvious from these early stages of TMVR, that CT analysis, very careful CT analysis, including sometimes 3D printing and pre-implanting the valve in those models, may end up with some answers. But imaging is going to be absolutely fundamental for choosing the type of valve that we are going to implant and how to manage the process of the implantation. So let's look at the data. The data is very, very, very limited, and what has been published is only a total of about 115 cases. And out of these 115 cases, if I have to base on my first initial impression, I was wrong. It's only 2% of the patients that they show the presence of paravalvular leak. So I think we have a long way to go. The basic take-home message that I can give is that the complexity of the mitral valve anatomy combined with the prosthesis design challenges suggest to be a high possibility for paravalvular leaks post-TMVR. However, the current data, although it's very limited, we know is not the case, and definitely we will need to do more in-depth data analysis of in the future once we start the pivotal trials in all of these patients. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Carlos, for a wonderful insight into how this field is moving very, very quickly.